Moving on now, Iran's new conservative president voiced support for the renewed nuclear negotiations in his international debut. Addressing the UN General Assembly in a pre-recorded address, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi said that Iran wants a resumption of nuclear talks with the world powers. Raisi called on the United States to fulfill its promises to end sanctions under the 2015 nuclear accord.
The Islamic Republic considers useful the talks whose ultimate outcome is the lifting of all oppressive sanctions, while decisively defending all its rights and the interests of its people. Iran is keen to have large-scale political and economic cooperation and convergence with the rest of the world. Over the past decade, the US has been making the mistake of modifying its way of war with the world instead of changing its way of life. An erroneous path cannot be brought to fruition by merely adopting a different method. Sanctions are the US new way of war with the nations of the world.
Now, Raisi devoted most of his speech to the denunciations of the United States, even hailing what he termed as the decline of the US hegemony. He pointed to the collapse of the Western-backed government in Afghanistan as well as the January US Capitol insurrection.
The United States hegemonic system has no credibility, whether inside or outside the country. What is seen in our region today proves that not only the hegemonist and the idea of hegemony, but also the project of imposing westernized identity have failed miserably.
Now, Raisi, who's under personal US sanctions over allegations of human rights abuses, said the US sanctions imposed on Iran by former President Donald Trump in 2018 were crimes against humanity during the coronavirus pandemic. Harsh sanctions reimposed by Trump since 2018 have given reason to Tehran to violate its deal's limits. However, Iran claims its nuclear steps are reversible if Washington lifts all of those sanctions. Now, talks between Iran and the United States to revive the 2015 nuclear pact came to a halt just days after Raisi was elected as Iran's president. Tehran said on Tuesday that talks with the world powers in Vienna to reinstate the nuclear pact would resume in about a few weeks. And President Joe Biden, appearing in person in his own maiden speech, UN speech earlier, had said that the United States was ready to return to the nuclear accord. But months of indirect negotiations since Biden's election have failed to revive the accord fully.
The United States remains committed to preventing Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. We're working with the P5+1 to engage Iran diplomatically and to seek a return to JCPOA. We're prepared to return to full compliance if Iran does the same.
And our correspondent Susan Tehrani gets us a report from Ground Zero. Take a look.
WION-USA Direct from New York with Susan Tehrani.
Iran's new president, Ebrahim Raisi, addressed the United Nations General Assembly for the first time on Tuesday and delivered a fiery address against the United States in a pre-recorded video address shortly after his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden. He took aim at what he called U.S. hegemony, saying that it has no credibility inside or outside of the United States, pointing to the January 6th protest inside the U.S. Capitol building and drawing parallels between that and the United States presence and foreign policy in Afghanistan and the Middle East at large. At one point saying, quote, the U.S. does not get to exit Afghanistan and Iraq, but it is expelled at the same time, end of quote. Regarding Iran's nuclear program and the so-called nuclear deal, or JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran's president said that they would only be useful, these talks, if they resulted in the lifting of all sanctions. Now, these comments come as there have been reports that Iran is expected to meet with the members of the P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany, to talk about Iran's nuclear program and possibly reviving those stalled nuclear talks on the sidelines of the General Assembly here in New York this week. So it will be interesting to see how all of that plays out and whether or not these talks will take place with the backdrop of this speech by Iran's newly elected president. We'll, of course, keep you up to speed on all the latest. For now, that is what we have. I'm Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION. World is
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.